No plastic surgery on my face, just my nose. It helped me breathe better so I can hit higher notes.
Michael Jackson didn't change his face simply to appear more beautiful. According to accounts that read like declassified FBI notes, he was driven by a desire to become someone entirely different, and his doctor was among the first to recognize the disturbing implication. Stephen Laughlin, a surgeon seasoned enough to remain unshaken in operating rooms for decades, reportedly felt a rare sense of unease when he understood that Michael was chasing an image so unfamiliar it could unsettle anyone who saw it. Beneath the careful, almost clinical incisions, the record suggests something deeper and more unsettling. A long, methodical obsession with self-reinvention, a transformation toward an identity the public had never known. Before we examine what these documents imply about that hidden path and how it may connect to the final chapter of his life, remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss what lies behind the truth of this legendary face. From the moment Michael stepped into the counseling room, the atmosphere reportedly shifted in a way internal observers would later describe as immediately anomalous. According to notes consistent with FBI-style briefing language, a sharp contradiction filled the space. The most recognizable figure on the planet, a global icon capable of stopping the world with a single appearance, now stood before Dr. Laughlin carrying an unexpected fragility. It was not weakness in the conventional sense, but the visible weight of a long-term psychological burden, years of pressure that had steadily worn down what little self-assurance remained in a man raised entirely under public scrutiny. Those close to the case described it as an obsession only the individual inhabiting that body could fully comprehend. Laughlin recognized this not solely through clinical training, but through intuition sharpened by decades of watching faces evolve. This case, however, diverged sharply from precedent. No patient had ever entered his care with eyes like these, eyes reflecting a simultaneous desire to flee from the self and be reborn as something else. No one had presented that contradiction so starkly, except Michael. There was no preamble, no polite diversions. According to reconstructed testimony, Michael spoke a single, unfinished sentence, enough to unsettle the room. "I want to look like..." He stopped. The sentence was never completed. Analysts would later note the pause itself as significant, as though he feared hearing the conclusion aloud. Yet his eyes, frequently referenced in supplemental notes, communicated what words did not. They flickered. They focused on an unseen image. They appeared to pursue a form only he could visualize. Laughlin had heard countless requests framed around beauty, confidence, or balance. This was different. What confronted him was not a request for enhancement, but for replacement. Not alteration, not refinement. A fundamental transformation. That distinction, according to the doctor's later recollection, sent an unmistakable chill through him. Long circulating accounts of Michael's childhood, ridicule centered on his nose, relentless judgment, lifelong surveillance, seemed to surface silently in his posture. Nothing needed to be explained. Faces carry histories, and Michael's bore too many unseen scars. The world saw the performer, the mirror showed something else. Laughlin had treated many famous figures, but none displayed such an extreme duality. The confidence of a prodigy paired with the insecurity of a child shaped by constant criticism. That realization forced Laughlin to pause, sensing this encounter would not resemble any prior doctor-patient exchange. This was not a passing desire, not vanity, not pressure from image consultants or stage demands. The objective was not cosmetic, it was existential. What Michael sought to change was not how he appeared on stage, but how he existed within himself after years of collision with public prejudice. What heightened the tension was the way Michael spoke. Even unfinished, his words carried the tone of a confession rather than a request. "I want to look like..." The statement hovered between hope and fear. Observers later described it as the sound of someone locating an escape route, while simultaneously fearing the consequences of taking it. Every pause, every glance downward and back up, conveyed internal conflict. Most striking was the blend of anticipation and anxiety in his eyes, a dual pull toward liberation from the past and terror of losing what remained of his identity. That contradiction may explain why the name was never spoken. Whether it was a real person, an abstract ideal, or an imagined perfection fueled by rumor remains unclear. What was evident was the depth of the pursuit. In that moment, Laughlin understood he was not facing a celebrity, but a man carrying sustained psychological trauma. A man shaped and cut by years of exposure. Without dramatics or explanation, Michael conveyed a sense of insufficiency, of not fitting accepted standards placed upon a dark-skinned artist in an unforgiving industry. The evidence was not verbal. It was visible. Laughlin later concluded this was not merely surgical consultation. It was entry into a concealed part of Michael's inner life, one perhaps never fully disclosed before, human, raw, and layered with accumulated pain. Plastic surgery is often dismissed as superficial. In this case, Laughlin sensed he was standing on a narrow boundary where a single decision could irreversibly alter the trajectory of the life before him. Never had he encountered a request so densely packed with emotion. The desire for acceptance, the urge to escape scrutiny, childhood ridicule, and the unspoken tension surrounding race, all present, though rarely articulated. From a clinical standpoint, this was not just observation of a patient. It was witnessing a prolonged process of self-redefinition, stretched between global expectation and private insecurity. Every silence, every tremor, every searching glance documented that conflict. When Michael left the room, Laughlin remained seated long after. He did not believe he had simply scheduled a procedure. He believed he had stepped into a deeply complex, vulnerable, and unresolved narrative, one that even with decades of experience, he was uncertain he was prepared to confront. Because in that look, he understood one thing with clarity. Michael did not merely want to change his face, he wanted to change his destiny. The changes did not begin abruptly, but with minor lines, subtle, seemingly insignificant details. Yet to Laughlin, every line on Michael's face carried a record, and over time those records moved beyond what could reasonably be considered safe. He distinctly recalls the moment the situation crossed from a request for correction into what internal notes would later describe as a documented fixation. That realization did not occur in the operating room, but while rewatching an ABC News interview from 1999, an interview that, in retrospect, he questioned whether he should have framed differently. He was very happy with his face. "I think he's done more than I recommended in terms of the changes." The statement was delivered calmly on camera, yet beneath its surface was a trace of discomfort that now feels unmistakable. In hindsight, Laughlin understood that this was not merely a medical observation. It was an implicit acknowledgement that his patient had exceeded boundaries he once believed were absolute. At the time, however, he felt unable to intervene more firmly, not because of Michael's fame, but because every return visit revealed a persistent, underlying anxiety. Refusal, he sensed, would strike directly at a psychological wound that had never healed. At first, Laughlin believed the issue centered on the nose, something Michael claimed interfered with his pronunciation and vocal performance. Gradually, it became clear that the concern went far beyond function or aesthetics. The nose dominated every consultation, every request, every silent moment before the mirror. On one occasion, Michael stood for an extended time in front of the clinic mirror, eyes fixed on a single point along the bridge of his nose. He made no complaint. He offered no explanation. Yet Laughlin recognized the process unfolding internally. Relentless comparison, repeated evaluation, dissatisfaction without words. "I want it to be more refined. I want it to be more compact. I want it to be like..." That unfinished sentence resurfaced repeatedly, unresolved, lingering like a thought he could never fully articulate. Soon, attention shifted to the chin. Michael scrutinized angles and contours, never explicitly naming the change he wanted. He would lean into the light, tilt his head left, then right, searching. On another visit, he asked about his skin, not with fear, but as though checking progress toward an internal benchmark. It was at this stage that Laughlin noted a clear transition. No longer a procedure, no longer a correction, no longer a matter of satisfaction. This had become a process of identity reconstruction. Within the medical team, quiet speculation circulated, whether derived from remarks Michael made or from observation alone, that he aspired to resemble an idealized, almost superhuman figure untouched by childhood ridicule. Laughlin could not confirm the accuracy of such claims, but one fact was undeniable. The fixation was real. Real enough to draw him back repeatedly, each time believing he was nearing a long-envisioned image. In a private exchange later cited by the media, Laughlin stated, "He kept focusing on his nose. His nose became the obsession. This was not judgment, but diagnosis. The nose had evolved into a symbol of early humiliation, perceived inadequacy, and constant evaluation through others' eyes." As a physician, Laughlin grew increasingly uneasy. The boundary between treatment and construction blurred. He questioned whether he was alleviating distress or facilitating the creation of an external persona. Each new request reinforced that concern. Michael did not stop, not from ambition, but because the original pain remained unresolved. More troubling was Michael's reaction after each procedure. Initially, there was relief, visible satisfaction, softened eyes, genuine smiles. But the effect faded quickly. Weeks later, the same expression returned. Searching, measuring, doubting. Another visit followed, another adjustment, another expectation. That was when Laughlin recognized that the unspoken truth, the look Michael carried without words, was no longer concealed. He was not simply changing his appearance, he was attempting to become someone else. No one could define who that someone was. Perhaps Michael himself could not. It may have been an imagined ideal, a modified version of himself, or an unattainable construct shaped by years of scrutiny. What remained certain was this: he was trying to escape his past, the gaze of others, and the shadow of his own reflection. And Laughlin, despite professional discipline and restraint, realized he was part of a progression he had never intended to enter. A progression without a clear endpoint, where each step required greater intervention and deeper compromise. The most unsettling detail was this: Michael never explicitly said he wanted to be someone else. But every look, every alteration, every silent moment made it unmistakably clear. Quietly, relentlessly, and that was when it truly began. The post-operative recovery period was when Laughlin observed Michael with the greatest clarity. No stage lighting, no perfected makeup, no iconic performance jacket. Only a man seated before a large mirror, his face still mildly swollen, faint incision lines visible under a muted yellow light that exposed every new contour. According to notes later described as resembling internal briefings, the recovery room mirror offered no illusions. It reflected everything, especially what its subject tried hardest to conceal. In that reflection, Laughlin consistently observed two conflicting states occupying the same face: a brief satisfaction paired with a deep, persistent emptiness. The sight unsettled him, not because of the surgical outcome, but because it felt like watching someone slowly detach from their own identity. This emptiness was not dramatic or volatile. It was quiet, enduring, and unresolved. Michael would lightly touch his altered features, a momentary brightness crossing his eyes, then lower his hand and study himself as if measuring the distance between who he was and who he was trying to reach. Time appeared to pause when Michael finally spoke, his voice low, restrained, almost without breath. "Do you think it looks like him?" He never completed the question. He never named who him was. At that instant, Laughlin recalled a remark he had once given to the press, one he later questioned for its honesty. He didn't want to be Michael Joseph Jackson. He just wanted to be something else. It was not an accusation. It was a clinical observation made by someone standing uncomfortably close to the internal struggle of a global figure. And as he looked at Michael through the mirror, Laughlin recognized the truth of it, despite wishing it were otherwise. That realization placed him in ongoing conflict. Should he continue approving requests, or should he intervene more decisively? Medical training demanded restraint and safety. Yet the patient before him was not ordinary. He was a symbol carrying public expectations so immense that every alteration echoed worldwide. Each decision carried disproportionate weight. Laughlin remembered his own earlier admission. "I think he's done more than I recommended." A measured statement, yet one that acknowledged Michael had surpassed medical boundaries. Complicating matters further was Michael's apparent satisfaction after each procedure. Not comfort, but temporary relief, as though he had briefly escaped the anxieties rooted in childhood. That relief never endured. Laughlin could always identify the shift. Michael's focus drifted away from the most recent change and moved elsewhere. Chin, jawline, skin beneath the eyes, then back to the nose. The repetition made one fact clear. Michael was looking at himself but not recognizing himself. There is a widely cited interview in which Michael stated, "I've had no plastic surgery on my face, just my nose. It helped me breathe better so I can hit higher notes." The delivery was calm, assured, almost convincing. And precisely because Michael seemed to believe it, Laughlin felt more sorrow than disagreement. Everyone develops mechanisms to survive pain. Denial, at times, is the least damaging option. Outside scrutiny, however, was relentless. Professional commentary emerged, detached and unsparing. Dr. Pamela Lipkin once remarked, "It's obvious that he's trying to look Caucasian. His nose is getting thinner every 6 months." The remark reverberated through the industry. Attention immediately fixed on Michael. For Laughlin, the concern was not the statement itself, but its inevitable impact on someone already sensitive to criticism about race and appearance since childhood. Those injuries had never healed. Public judgment struck against psychological wounds still exposed. While public discourse intensified, Laughlin witnessed a contradiction unseen by audiences. Michael said the surgeries were functional. His body suggested otherwise. Michael claimed little had changed. His eyes searched constantly for a new reflection. Michael smiled after procedures. The emptiness behind that smile persisted. He was not intentionally misleading. More likely, he was protecting himself, preserving fragments of an identity he feared losing entirely. For Laughlin, that disparity was the most devastating element. He saw an artist capable of commanding entire arenas, yet unable to reconcile with his own image. On stage, he controlled everything. Before the mirror, he stood silent, engaged in a private conflict no one could intervene in. And the mirror, unforgiving and precise, always revealed the same conclusion. He was still not who he wanted to be. Change after change failed to resolve the distance. The smile masked alienation. The face evolved. The pain remained. That was when Laughlin understood a fundamental truth. Some procedures are not performed on the body. They are etched into the soul. And no surgeon, regardless of skill, can operate there. One day, when he entered the recovery room, Laughlin felt as though he had crossed into a different realm. Not the world of stadium lights or celebrity spectacle, but a space marked by an unsettling stillness, where a human being appeared to be slowly separating from the form destiny had once assigned him. Michael sat motionless in a chair, his face angled beneath the stark white light. And in that instant, Laughlin understood he had reached a boundary he had once vowed never to cross. He no longer saw the hesitant young man who had first asked about correcting his nose. Instead, he was confronted by a face that was both recognizable and alien, shaped by so many procedures that each feature seemed to speak of physical exhaustion. The chin appeared unnaturally sharp. The eyes were wide, more intense yet strangely vacant, as if emotion itself had been stretched thin beneath altered skin. The eyebrows sat permanently high, unmistakable evidence of forehead lifts and facelifts, interventions Laughlin never imagined contemplating for someone of Michael's age. At that moment, the words of Pamela Lipkin, phrases he had once hoped were exaggerations, reverberated in his thoughts like an alarm. Michael Jackson has what we call an end-stage nose, a crucified nose, one that's beyond the point of no return. Laughlin felt his throat tighten because he knew exactly who was being described. The name no longer belonged to an icon of music, but to a patient standing at the edge every surgeon fears, the edge where control begins to slip away. He had never believed he would contribute to a face considered beyond redemption. In medicine, limits are understood. Skin loses elasticity, structures lose strength, and every additional alteration becomes a calculated risk. Yet with Michael, those principles seem to dissolve, not because of coercion, but because the internal pain driving the requests made refusal feel like a deeper wound than compliance. As he watched Michael gently trace the outline of his nose, now stripped of much of its original structure, Laughlin felt a cold certainty settle in. This was not about improvement, it was about erasure. Michael was trying to leave his former self behind. At first glance, such a desire might sound extreme. But viewed through the lens of his life, it became disturbingly human. Who, after enduring endless mockery about appearance, has not wished to look different? Who, bearing global expectations from childhood, has not dreamed of a face free from judgment? For Michael, these were not passing thoughts. They were years of accumulated pain, powerful enough to turn surgery into refuge, and sometimes the only form of escape he recognized. Looking at the face before him, now far removed from its origins, Laughlin felt something unfamiliar. Fear that he was losing control. Fear that his own hands were shaping a version of the man the world adored into something unrecognizable. Not the child with the gentle smile from the early years, not the figure millions believed they knew. Meanwhile, rumors intensified, swirling beyond the operating room. He wanted to look like a being beyond life itself, something eternal. Some suggested a surreal ideal. Others spoke of an otherworldly beauty. Laughlin dismissed the speculation, yet the steady transformation made the whispers difficult to ignore. He wanted to deny it. But each time Michael returned, with a pleading look, with a soft yet unwavering voice, Laughlin sensed they were moving deeper into a path without return. The goal was no longer beauty. It was escape. What made it most alarming was this realization. Michael had lost the natural human ability to recognize when to stop. The internal signal most people rely on, the instinct that says, "this is enough," had been silenced. Years of trauma, relentless judgment, and the pressure to embody perfection had drowned it out. Laughlin questioned himself relentlessly. How does a doctor say no to such pain? How does one refuse when the eyes before him carry suffering shaped over a lifetime? How does he send someone away with the very face they have spent years trying to flee? Yet continuing meant entering the vortex, becoming part of the tragedy, becoming complicit in the transformation. For most physicians, refusal is a professional act. For the world's most famous patient, it becomes something else entirely, an event with consequences far beyond the clinic, and one that could inflict another psychological wound on the man seeking relief. And so, doctor and patient became secondary figures in a narrative larger than both of them, a story without a clear ending, driven by pain, desire, and the crushing weight of fame. Standing there that day, studying Michael's face under the unforgiving light, Laughlin understood one inescapable truth. They had gone too far from the beginning, too far from safety, too far from Michael's true self, and there was no clear way back. What haunted Laughlin most were not the fine, thread-like incisions, nor the long hours spent beneath surgical lights refining every millimeter of Michael's face. What stayed with him were the silences afterward, the wordless recovery sessions, where Michael sat perfectly still, his hands resting on his altered features as if searching for something familiar. Time seemed to contract in those moments, leaving only the soft rhythm of breathing from someone trying to convince himself he was all right, while inwardly he was not. In retrospect, Laughlin found himself returning to a question he could never fully resolve. Had he healed a fractured sense of self? Or had he unknowingly helped create something even more distant? The question persisted not out of remorse, but from understanding. He recognized the forces that had driven Michael there, The external voices, the casual mockery, the impossible standards imposed on someone already vulnerable. Few people can endure lifelong scrutiny under a magnifying glass, particularly when appearance becomes a louder subject than talent. Laughlin recalled the day he spoke to the media, a line later extracted and repeated with clinical detachment. "I think he's done more than I recommended." It was said with genuine concern, an acknowledgement that any original boundary had long been crossed. And yet the paradox remained. Michael appeared very happy with his face. Each time Laughlin saw that satisfaction, he felt momentarily reassured. But the reassurance never held. Beneath it was always a subtle disturbance, as if the contentment were only a temporary veil. The question returned again and again. Was that happiness authentic, or merely a brief escape from an identity that caused pain? No one could answer it, not even Michael. With time, Laughlin came to see that the truth extended beyond medicine into the unusual bond they shared. On one side stood the surgeon, responsible for physical outcomes. On the other stood the artist, a figure who had long ceased to be ordinary. Beneath those roles were two people attempting to understand one another despite living in entirely different realities. For Michael, appearance was never superficial. It functioned as armor against insecurity, rooted in childhood. Change, in his view, was not about vanity or perfection, but about feeling enough, feeling right, feeling able to exist within his own skin. For Laughlin, each incision carried weight beyond technique. It bore the unspoken pressure to ease a pain that no procedure could truly reach. Amid these contradictions, one unresolved question lingered in Laughlin's mind. Was the image Michael pursued truly another person, or simply a self reshaped by isolation, fame, and relentless expectation? At times, Laughlin believed Michael only wanted to erase what hurt. At others, meeting his distant gaze, he sensed something deeper, a desire to escape the very existence attached to the name Michael Jackson. Not to abandon himself, but to shed the burden imposed on that name: perfection, brilliance, constant transcendence. The loneliness of a legend was rarely discussed, yet quietly present. This realization reshaped Laughlin's understanding of his profession. He once believed surgery existed to make people feel better. After Michael, he learned a harder truth. Some desires exceed the reach of medicine. When the wish to be someone else overtakes the wish to be well, the doctor becomes more than a practitioner. He becomes a witness to a silent tragedy, one without blood, yet capable of leaving deeper scars than any blade. During quiet nights, when the operating room stood empty, Laughlin would pause before the large mirror in the preparation area, not to adjust his attire, but to confront the question Michael never voiced. How much change is enough for someone who has been hurt? There was no answer. Perhaps there never would be. Once, while watching television during a break, he saw Michael performing. Stage lights illuminated a face shaped by countless transformations, striking, unfamiliar, powerful, fragile. A beauty difficult to define, a presence impossible to categorize. And suddenly, one question stood clear: a legend transformed, but at what cost? On stage, Michael appeared almost unreal, radiant beyond reach. But Laughlin knew that behind that light stood a man still trying to persuade himself that he had finally done enough. When the screen went dark, Laughlin leaned against the wall for a long time, not from exhaustion, but from a quiet sense of loss. Not the loss of a physician, but the loss felt by someone who had witnessed too much change, extraordinary and unbearably painful. He understood then that there are surgeries meant to correct and others meant to escape. Michael lived on the line between them, and the memory of him remained, soft, enduring, unresolved. Faces are never just faces. Changes are never only skin and bone, and legends are reborn again and again. Not because they want to change, but because the world never allows them to remain still. In the final assessment, Michael Jackson's path, viewed through the observations of Dr. Laughlin, reads less like a chronicle of physical alteration and more like an internal record of a man slowly giving pieces of himself away in pursuit of a calm he never truly reached. Beneath the glare of fame existed quiet unrest, unseen injuries, and a persistent need to feel enough by his own measure, not the world's. The account serves as a sober reminder that while surfaces can be reshaped, the inner self resists repair longer than any scar ever could. If this documented journey resonates with you, please leave a comment with your perspective, and subscribe so you don't miss the next in-depth examination.